You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And we will be doing politics this evening as we have as our guest State Representative Julie Hamos. She, of course, has been state representative in her district. What is that district?
18th.
And the 18th for the last 10 years. Julie knows as much about public policy, I think, as anybody around here across the state of Illinois. She really is a public policy person. She's a politics person. We thank her so much for coming from the 18th. And of course, where she came from originally was from Hungary. When she left there when she was 7 years old with her parents, Holocaust survivors, ran with virtually nothing.
Nothing.
Arriving eventually in Cleveland, Ohio. Mm-hmm. And then Washington University, George Washington University, working for AVSME after that, House Ways and Means Committee attorney, also working in the state's attorney's office going back to when the state's attorney was then state's attorney Mayor Daley, or the state's attorney Richard M. Daley, who of course became the mayor. The 18th we'll come back to, but it's the North Shore. I mean, basically it's Evanston, East Wilmette, Kenilworth, Winnetka, a small portion of Rogers Park, and a very small portion of Glencoe. She is the chair of the Mass Transit Committee, which is, as everybody would know, has been much in the news over the last year, highly important. They got a fair amount of funding. There's still issues. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about Barack Obama because Julie Hamos, we were talking just before the show, knew him way back when he was just a state senator and probably wasn't even thinking about running for president at that time, or at least didn't tell anybody, but certainly shortly thereafter or sometime in his 6th or 5th year as state senator, I'm sure that's when he came on this show and he started talking about running for the U.S. Senate. So we'll be talking about Barack Obama because Ms. Hamos has been out there in Iowa canvassing for him, perhaps doing a little surrogate work. And let's just start right there with Representative Hamos. Barack Obama, John McCain. You know of John McCain, you know Barack Obama personally, you helped make him a U.S. Senator. What's the essence of Barack Obama? Why should people out there who don't know him so well and think, and maybe you're independents, and maybe you're undecided between Barack Obama and John McCain, talk to those people, and in 30 seconds or less, why should they prefer Barack Obama? In your mind. We of course take no position on this.
No, of course not. So I was in Iowa, and I had a chance to talk to people in a very personal way because knowing Barack close up and watching how skillful he is has given me a very different perspective. And what I believe is that he is so smart and so thoughtful. Sometimes it comes across as being even-handed. You know, he sees both sides of an issue. That's what we need in this complex world. And I have seen how he is able to take that kind of analysis and smarts, roll up his sleeve, bring people around a table, and negotiate really important, complex legislation. The most important one for Illinois was when, on his way out the door practically as Illinois Senator, he passed a bill that requires videotaping of interrogations and confessions. Nobody wanted to touch that with a 10-foot pole. The police and state's attorneys were against it. Barack did that. The reason we have that law is because of one person. That's skill and political courage. Doesn't get any better than that.
So that's it. You're saying that shows he can bring people together on a tough issue and he can pass legislation.
Willingness to take on the tough issues and knowing how to get it done and reaching across the aisle. And again, sometimes it comes across as very even-handed. And people, the Democrats want to say, get tougher, Barack, come on, lay into him. It's not his style. He's a very even-tempered guy. But he's so smart and so skillful. I'm excited about him becoming president.
Well, is he tough enough to deal with Vladimir Putin? I mean, there you have to lay into somebody. You have to take a tough policy.
He's going to do it not by saber rattling, not by being bombastic, not by making strong comments. And he's going to do that in a skillful way. He's very, very thoughtful. And the other thing that we now know from watching this campaign is that he knows how to bring the right people around him. He's going to have great staff. He's going to have great analysts working with him. And I just have so much confidence that this is what the world needs right now. And people all over the world are looking at our election and they're all rooting for Barack Obama because they know that we need a different style, that the United States of America needs to project ourselves in a very different way. And it's all about what Barack brings to the table. And it's his strength, it's his skill, it's his style.
What about his lack of experience? Basically 2 years in the U.S. Senate, then running for president for 2 years, and that would be it. That's what his opponents say. Insufficient national experience. John McCain, they say, is a quarter of a century in the military, another quarter of the century in Congress. You value experience. You've been in the state legislature for 10 years, and you were preparing much of your life before that by dealing with public policy issues. So taking your own life as an example, you didn't just jump in and become even a state rep, and I say that with all due respect, but still some would say that's a relatively low office. Look at the preparation you had for that office, and now some say you should be running for governor. I know you don't want to get into that, but still, if you did run, you'd be able to point to 10 years in the legislature as experience. Do you see the point?
Well,
you're pretty prepared if you were going to run for governor. Is he prepared to be president?
I have a different resume, it's true. And there are no two people are alike with their resumes. So yes, it's true. For 25 years before I entered public life, I was already working on public policy issues. It happens to be who I am. But what I just described for you, when I watched Barack in action on complex legislation, to me, political courage and skills trump experience. Now, John McCain has 26, and I put experience in quotes. John McCain has 26 years, I think, in the Illinois Senate. Only in the Senate? Congress too? I think a little bit in Congress.
About 4 years in the House, and about 22 years, I think, in the Senate.
Except for the finance reform law, and let's put reform in quotes also, I cannot think of anything he did. So what accomplishments has John McCain really had the entire time that he's been in the Senate? We haven't heard of any, because they don't exist.
Gang of 14, do you remember? He was one of those people who got an agreement between Democrats and Republicans to get some judges appointed that the Democrats and Republicans are confirmed that they could agree on. Others were withdrawn. So people were saying there was going to go to the point of actually breaking the filibuster rule, which, as you know, is a big tradition in the Senate. The nuclear option, as I think they called it. They didn't pursue it. Instead, he sat down with Democrats, worked it out. That's his point, is that he doesn't talk bipartisan, he is bipartisan. That's an example of what he did.
And I'm not saying he didn't.
And Barack didn't participate in that. He didn't participate in the Gang of 14. He could have.
Well, again, they have different experiences that they bring to the table. They're both a set of experiences, life experiences, judgment, the ability to work across the aisle. They both have that. But I have seen Barack Obama close up, and I know his skill, and I know he is going to present a very different style to the rest of the world. So I'm a huge supporter. I wouldn't say that about everybody. I met him, it turns out, when I was a community organizer. He was a young guy. He was just a community organizer. I was already working for the county clerk's office on election reform. We went to him because he was doing voter registration. I walked out of my very first meeting with him, and I said to my client, he's going to be governor someday. Now, I wasn't aiming high enough, but I saw
you might be right.
I saw something so special in him the very first time I met him.
And if he doesn't win, and that could happen, even if he is as good as you say, he's running in a very tough race. It could be a very tight race. If he loses, do you think the play for Barack Obama would be to come back and run for governor in 2010?
I don't see that, but we have a lot of people running for governor, as you and I talked. I don't see him coming back. I'm not sure that being governor is where he really was sort of aiming. And I think he does have a worldview, and I think he will find other ways to do it. But right now, I think he's going to be president.
Okay, well, one thing, and then we'll get on to the state issues, but as you know, a lot of people, basically everybody who's watching public policy these days, they're talking about the bailout, the so-called bailout.
Yes.
And as we tape this, which is September 28th, a Sunday, we don't know if on Monday or even today there will be announced agreement and then a vote later today or tomorrow on what could be a $700 billion bailout. One, how much do you know about that? And you're a pretty informed person, so I didn't say that to put you on the spot, but if you don't know a lot, I don't think a lot of people out there know a lot. So one, how much do you know? What do you think about Barack's position? We watched them discuss that, them being McCain and Obama, a little bit on the recent debate. What do you know about that, and what do you know about Barack's position on the so-called bailout?
I don't know very much, and I'm not sure that the average congressman knows very much before they have to vote on this. I watch the Sunday morning talk shows like many other people do, and somebody called this high-level extortion, and that's really what it feels like. They have guns to their head, and why they have to...
I think it was Bob Reich, I think it was.
Reich.
Yeah, right.
I think I think that the fact that they're being asked to do this in a matter of days is shocking to me. And I tend to take a more conservative position. I tend to agree with the conservatives that are saying, How do we know how much these assets are valued at? Who's getting bailed out? What constraints are we going to put on this? What does this mean long-term for American relationships between government and the private sector? I think there are a lot of questions here, and I would ask a further question as a state legislator: what is this really going to mean for the federal budget, and how is that going to impact the state budget? We depend on the federal government for a lot of money to come back to the states. If they're taking all of our money and swooping it up in this bailout to help the financial industry, what is this really going to mean for our Medicaid dollars? We have a lot of dollars we depend on, education dollars. I'm very worried.
And yet, Barack's announced principles early on that he said ought to be adhered to on this.
It's the best he could do under the circumstances with a gun to everybody's head.
But he
That's how I
doesn't
see
seem
it.
to be trying to slow it down. McCain actually did. He went to Washington, he suspended his campaign. Barack said, he can do 3 things at one time, or 10
come on,
things.
that was showbiz.
You don't think so?
That was showbiz. He did not, for 24 hours, he decided to play some kind of game on the American people. He had almost nothing to do with the final package. Fine, because there's plenty of people working on it in Washington. Nobody should give John McCain credit for this.
You don't think he's been trying to slow it down,
But I think
as you
what
said,
Barack
slow it
did
down?
say, what I think Barack did say is that a president has to multitask, and you can't afford to say, I'm not going to work on this issue today because somebody else has brought another issue to me. You have to be able to juggle quite a few complex needs in America. So the fact that Barack kept going and was making his phone calls and was weighing in and was helping to shape the final package is a good thing. I think the final package is better than the one they brought to us a few days before, but still, I think we should all be asking more questions.
All right, so if you had a vote, just hypothetically, and you were in Congress, do you think you'd be voting to support this bailout based on what you know about it now?
Because probably my Democratic leadership would talk me into the fact that this is the best we can do.
Speaker Pelosi would be telling you that.
She would be
Jan Schakowsky, your senior Democratic Congresswoman.
I expect them to vote for it because I think it's the best we can do under a very unusual set of circumstances, and we don't know enough about the private markets to be able to play any kind of games and take risks. And we don't want to take risks with people's savings and with their finances, and I think under the circumstances, it's probably the best that we could do.
All right, so going over to the state issues now.
Yes.
One of the topics of this program is...
We're not doing the best we can do there.
Yeah, can the Democratic Party govern? Because they have control, obviously, of the State House, where you are. They have the majority, a veto-proof majority in the state Senate. They, being the Democratic Party, have the governor's mansion.
Right.
You could say they have the Supreme Court, and yet it seems to be chaos for the last 6 years.
It's true, and it's very embarrassing, and I have nothing to say that would justify the way we're responding to big issues that we're dealing with at the state level. I think there are problems, and the problems stem from the fact that we have certainly the Democratic leaders in the House and the Senate and the governor who cannot get along, who refuse to cooperate with each other, and who refuse really to even sit down in the same room.
So for those who don't follow this regularly, of course, the governor is Rod Blagojevich, the Senate president is Emil Jones, the House Speaker, your leader, it would be Mike Madigan.
They don't even like each other enough to sit in the same room to work on issues of the day.
And you know what Mike Madigan, you see this, people who are regular viewers of Illinois, of public affairs would know when we saw Mike Madigan, Speaker Mike Madigan out at the Democratic Convention. I asked him about this and he said, Speaker Mike said this, he said, Jeff, this is just issues. It's not personality. This is what he said. Would Speaker Mike say something that wasn't true?
He doesn't want to say it's personalities, but I think that
he said,
has,
excuse me, but he said he pointed to the GRT, the gross receipts tax. He says that's an example. We didn't think it was good for the state. It wasn't a personality. That's a policy difference.
That's true.
That's what he said.
That's totally true.
Okay.
And the fact that there have been legitimate policy differences and we have acted them out, that's fine. We can handle that.
But there's something else going on here?
My problem, they refuse to sit down in the same room to develop a coordinated plan of action.
But he said that. I asked him about that.
That's about personalities. That's about hostility.
Speaker Mike said, no, he says it wasn't productive. I've sent a person there who can get these done. He says, I found that when I go there, nothing gets done. So I tried to send somebody who had the authority to negotiate. And who was that? That was his majority leader, Barbara Flynn Curry, right?
Yes.
If anybody, she's been in the House a long time. She's got his respect.
Right.
So is he really being disingenuous there?
And she has my respect, and I should
So is he
make
being
sure
disingenuous that Curry can't represent him?
Well, everybody at that table knows that Barbara Flynn Curry cannot do a final deal.
She has to go back to her boss,
Absolutely.
Speaker Mike.
I mean, when the leaders are not at the same table they cannot get the job done.
All right, so where do we go forward from September 28th when we're taping it here? What is it? Is the major issue to be decided capital plan?
Well, let me tell you, we have big problems. We passed a budget that was $2 billion out of balance. Right now, the governor vetoed $1.5 billion out of it. We blamed the governor, but it was kind of our fault.
When you say our, who do you mean?
The legislature passed
House
a budget.
and the Senate.
House and Senate passed a budget that was $2 billion out of balance.
Except the Senate claims
It's
they
not
had
even constitutional to do
revenue.
that.
The Senate claims they had a revenue package, so there wasn't.
So today, on September 28th, we have been able to give the governor $250 million by taking it out of different fund transfers. The rest of the budget is still very much in flux. So we have this $1.5 billion. We don't know. The providers don't know.
That's still in deficit, is what you're saying.
Well, yes.
So
and they're not going to. We're not going to have the spending to support it. The governor still isn't going to pay for the services. So we have a lot of providers right now that are still in flux. They don't know how their budget looks for the year. They can't plan ahead. We're going to have to probably cut back on many of the services we want to fund. But having said that, let me say this. We needed to tighten our belt. We should not have passed a budget that was out of balance. We have a tough economy. We're not going to pass taxes. We're not going to be able to give a whole lot more money to all these providers. They've been left hanging because we pretended to them that they were going to get all these goodies out of the state budget. That was never going to happen. We don't have the revenues to support it. And we're not going to raise taxes to get more revenues. So we're going to have a tough year this year. We're going to have a tough year next year. But I want to err on the side of honesty with our providers and not pretend that we have the largesse and pat ourselves on the back for passing this big budget when we know that we do not have the revenues to support it. That's a problem.
What should be cut in the budget? What $1.5 billion should be cut to balance it?
I was supporting a flat budget. I did not want to increase it.
Specifically, what would you take out of the budget that's in there?
No, Jeff, we increased it by $2 billion. Okay. I was supporting.
That was $2 billion over the operating $30 billion budget?
That was on top.
The operating is $30 billion, $2 billion increase?
Look, in a year, we have
7% increase?
We have what we would call the fiscal year 08 budget. In the fiscal year 09 budget, we added $2 billion of spending. I was supporting a flat budget. Okay. If we couldn't afford it, then people should remain at the same level.
So what is in that addition that should be removed? Can you give people an idea of what kinds of things were expanded?
Well, we put all kinds of things. We even put more in for education than we can really afford.
Okay.
So all these many years, we put in $300 million more for education every year than the previous year. This year, I think we put in $500 million.
So that's your solution? Everything goes back to pre-existing levels of the year before?
We had to constrain our budgets based on the FY08 and not just willy-nilly spend money that we didn't have.
But the rumor out there, especially believed in by Republicans, is what's happening here is that Speaker Mike thinks he can pick up 5 or 6 votes. He will then have a veto-proof House. There's a veto-proof Senate. In January of 2009, Speaker Mike and Senate President Jones announced they favor an income tax increase. The legislature passes that. The governor can veto it, but it'll be overridden.
We're not going to pass an income tax increase.
You're not. You're giving people an oath, right? You're saying that September 28th, 2008.
I will not support an income tax increase personally until we have a better economy. That is untenable to think about an income tax increase.
Can you look people in the eye and say not only that, but you think Speaker Mike Madigan won't support it?
No, I never know what's on his mind.
So he could be trying to do that.
If he can't get me to vote for an income tax increase, and I'm from a district that is fairly generous and liberal, progressive,
then he needs Republicans to do it, and you're thinking he can't do that?
Not possible.
So
the economy is very tough. We can't even be talking about an income tax.
So no major.
People out there would think we were nuts to be talking about it right now.
Okay.
This is a timing issue, Jeff.
Does that mean at least
right now we are not going to pass an income tax increase? It's not possible to do it. We shouldn't even be talking about it.
Can you say that's at least throughout 2009?
I'm pretty sure it's true. We have to see what happens to the economy, and now
so you're pretty
we
sure,
have a federal. Let me just say this again. The federal bailout of $700 billion is going to have impact on our budget too. We don't know how the economy is, if the economy is going to rebound. It's all very uncertain today on September 28th, and I don't support an income tax increase in the middle of that kind of tough economic climate.
Okay, but you can't virtually guarantee that the House and the Senate, Democratic controlled, might not try in 2009 to pass a major tax increase, whether it's income tax, sales tax, something else?
I don't,
you can't guarantee that.
I
You're
can't,
saying
no.
you don't think,
I
but you don't think they would
guarantee
try
that,
it.
of course not.
You don't think it would be wise politics?
I'm a rank and file minion in the Illinois House of Representatives. Nobody asks my advice on that.
All right, so what else? As chairman of the Mass Transit Committee, how concerned are you? You passed a major funding bill.
Yes.
People say that should be enough, and then they hear that
Right.
people in mass transit agencies, RTA, they want more money. Should they get more money? What's the problem here?
Well, I totally understand what's going on with the CTA budget. There are 5 different issues, real quickly. One is free rides for seniors does in fact cost money.
How much does it
$30
cost?
million this year so far.
So
And
that's
and
$30
it only
million
started
that
up in
wasn't
April.
there.
Right.
Okay.
Then the governor did a double whammy. He took out $32 million that the CTA was getting. He vetoed it out of the budget.
Took out
But they
how
were
much?
$32 million.
Okay.
So he turned a program for seniors and disabled into a $62 million hit on the CTA budget. Okay? Double whammy for no reason at all. Third is that the revenues that we gave them have not been coming in at the pace that we had expected. Sales tax, real estate transfer tax. Those are a product of the economy too. Fourth, the high
How much
cost
is
of
that?
diesel
How much
fuel.
is that?
I don't know.
Sure. Okay.
There are numbers attached to all these, but the point is, the fourth is the high cost of diesel. That's affecting every transit agency. It's affecting everyday people. We all understand that, fuel costs. And fifth, interestingly, because we have not been able to pass a capital plan in Springfield, they are repairing old buses. Maintenance of old equipment costs more than just making the investments in the first place. So there are 5 pressures right now on the CTA budget. I don't know how they're going to balance that. We tried to restore some of that money with our work in Springfield last year, but I don't know how they're going to get through this year or plan for next year's budget.
And that's just the CTA. It doesn't get
But
into
that
Metro.
also
It
is
doesn't get
temporary.
into Metro, which
That's
is also
right.
a concern
But
of your
CTA
constituents.
is having the toughest problem right now in terms of their budget, and I think it's short term. Again, one has to think longer term, but right now it's a very tough budget climate for the CTA.
And you know, the critics out there say there just still hasn't been enough reform. You got to have more options. You have to have more competition. None of that's happening if you don't do that.
I don't know what any of that means. We
You don't know what
passed
it
a
means?
major package with funding and reform. I'm very hopeful that when the reform really kicks in, it's going to take a little while to do it. We're going to have a better system, a more coordinated system, more accountability, more efficiency. It's going to happen.
What kind of retirement package exists now for those in the CTA? How early can they retire, and is it too generous?
You know what? For the first time ever in the history of Illinois, we sat down the public employee unions and said, we are going to change your pension plan. We are going to change your retiree health care package. I'm very proud that I was part of a true reform effort. The Civic Federation downtown saluted us. The Civic Committee saluted us. The business community saluted us. It's the reason we were able to pass the bill. I'm not going to undermine the work we just did over a several-year period.
You think you did enough?
We did, for the very first time, we had reform of the CTA pension plan and retiree health care plan.
All right. So left to be decided, and we haven't really said that, is also the capital plan.
Yes.
Which is the whole larger issue.
Right. That's a big problem for Illinois. We have not
Can
had a capital
Illinois
plan since 1999.
Can Illinois afford a capital plan in light of what you just said about not favoring any income tax increase, which would be needed perhaps to finance the capital plan?
Well, we never talked about the income tax increase for that. Some people might. We didn't do it last time that way. We've never done it with an income tax increase.
So how are you going to finance the capital plan?
The only revenue source on the table is with this partial lease of the lottery. We have passed that in the House now. I think we've added some good provisions into it. It would generate $7 billion for capital. That's certainly something. It's better than nothing, is what I would say.
$7 billion not to spend. Well, it would help finance that plan.
It would create a capital plan for Illinois. And I think it's the only revenue source that I know of right now that's on the table. That's what I would say. Let's turn that into a 3-year pay-as-you-go, pay for some real construction projects, roads, bridges, capital,
so you're saying
transit,
you
school
wouldn't borrow
construction.
the $7 billion you got?
I would not borrow.
You would use that $7 billion over 3 years
That would
to
be my
spend on
proposal.
capital. Is anybody else saying that?
I don't
Other
know.
than Julie Hamos?
Nobody's talking about capital.
Well, they are.
I have
Come
a
on,
very,
people are talking about it.
Not exactly right now. On the day we're sitting here in your studio, not enough people are talking about capital.
The governor says
There's not enough people talking about capital. And the other revenue sources, I think, are not going to pan out. So I'm looking at what is right now as a possibility, and I think we can actually have a capital plan for Illinois.
And some of that capital would go to the RTA, some would go to schools, Some would go to construction,
University
school.
buildings, state facilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Roads, bridges,
Right.
all of that.
Right.
A pruned-down version, because the governor wanted a 25. At one point, it was a $34 billion plan.
Yeah, but that's mixing apples and oranges. So when I talk about $7 billion, it doesn't include the money coming into the road fund. It doesn't include the federal match. If you add all that, the $7 billion is more like a $16 billion program.
I see. Okay.
But it's not 35. It's true.
All right, but all that to happen, you need a governor, you need a Senate president, you need
Now, we are
a
going to have a
speaker.
new Senate president.
Yeah,
That could
because
change the dynamics.
So you're saying the capital plan waits to 2009 when you have a new Senate president?
Well, yes, but that could be in a few months.
Yeah.
They
It
could
might
be
not wait
voting
till
for a
January. They
Senate
may do that
president in a
before the
few
end of the
months,
year.
yeah.
Do the
That could
Republicans
change the
count in this? Do
dynamics.
you need the Republican support on the House and the Senate side? Do you need Tom Cross, the minority leader for the Republicans in the House? Do you need Frank Watson, Senate Republican leader?
You know what, before January, to make anything immediately effective, we need 3/5 vote. After January, we go back to simple majority.
Okay.
So
but do you
theoretically,
need them
we
for
could do
cover?
this.
But do you need them for cover because, you know, Speaker Mike likes these structured roll call votes. In some districts, the capital plan may not be popular. He wants Republicans there.
But we passed the
Is
lease
that-
of the lottery. We passed the lease of the lottery with bipartisan support.
Okay.
We can do that again.
All right.
Yeah,
So
right
you'd
now,
like
that's
to have
sitting in the
Republicans
Senate.
involved. You'd like Watson
Yeah.
and Cross involved.
Yeah, sure.
You're not sure if it's
And right
necessary.
now, that's sitting in the Senate. They can act on that. We can have a capital plan. We can do it before the next construction
What if the
season.
governor's indicted? You know, there are all these rumors going around in Capitol Facts about the IRS is looking at, and they say they have investigative teams, and there's enough to indict. Think about that for a second. We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, State Representative Julie Hamos. Thank you so much,
Thank
Julie,
you.
for coming.
Thanks.
She's great. She's been here. We've been doing this show 10 years, at least once a year. You'll keep coming?
Maybe. If
She
you're nice
says
to me.
Maybe. If I give her some cookies, whatever.
We
Okay.
do talk about good issues, so
Okay.
I say yes.
Appreciate you coming. Okay.
Okay.
That's an issue, though. Could the governor be indicted?
Yeah.
Are you hearing that the IRS is taking a
Well,
look at
didn't
him?
we just read that Resco might be talking?
That could be part of the same thing. If Resco talks, does the government
That
get
was just
indicted?
today's story. For the first time, I did not know that.
Okay. But if that happens, do you think the governor does get indicted?
I don't know.
And if he does get indicted, does that slow it down, or what does it do to the mix in terms of working these things out
Pat
that we've been
Quinn
talking
will
about?
wake up a very happy man.
He could be governor.
He could be governor.
And then if he becomes governor,
His whole strategy is to become the incumbent governor.
that's it. So he runs 2010 as the incumbent.
Incumbent.
He
That's
runs
his
against
strategy.
Lisa Madigan.
No, he thinks everybody else will fold away.
What do you think?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? So Lisa stays there. Alexi, the state treasurer, comes in.
I
Pat
don't
Quinn
know if
is the
Alexis
governor.
is going to run.
You don't know? You don't think?
I don't know.
Dan Hines, state comptroller,
Dan
he would
Hines
be
is
there.
running. Dan Hines has told me he's running, and Bill Daley has told me he's running.
Too much Daley, you think, if you've got Daley as the
There
mayor
seems
and
to
Daley
be
as the
some
governor?
thinking about that in some quarters.
All right.
But Rich Daley is very popular.
But you're not
So-
ready to think about running
I'm
Julie
not
Hamos
running in
for
that
governor? Not
field.
running for governor?
No.
That's too crowded a field for you?
Yes.
If Lisa got out, you'd run in a heartbeat, right?
I don't know. We'll talk.
You think about it. All right, so looking forward, aside from just the horse race on these issues, what about the Republicans? Do you see them at...
I don't know where the Republicans are. I haven't heard of any names. Doug Whitley is the one name that has surfaced. He's a good guy. I think he would be a formidable... I
Tom
don't know
Cross,
that-
do you think? You know him from the House? Is he
I'm
ready to run for
told
governor?
that his liberals, he's liberal on social policies, and that he could not get through his own primary.
Bill Brady?
That's what I'm told.
You know Bill? He's a
I
state
don't know
legislature?
much about him, but he didn't do too well last time.
So you don't think so?
I think
How
he might
about Paul
try.
Vallis for governor on the Republican side?
Why?
Why? Because the Democrats, it's too crowded to field?
I
He's a
know,
fiscal
but
conservative?
Do we really like
He's
people who are
independent?
just willing to switch parties for
Did
their
you
own
support Paul Vallis in
self-aggrandizement? Yes, I
2022?
did.
Would you support him if he ran as a Republican?
No, I'm with the Democrat.
So you're not so
I'm
far
going to be
partisan.
with one of the Democrats.